Hey everyone, this is Lisa from Life in Layouts, and today I am back with Simple Stories Saturday. This is a monthly collaboration where we showcase our love for simple stories. Today I pulled out Simple Stories School Rocks. I also pulled out this sketch from Scrapbook Generation, and I am able to get a ton of photos on my layout. So when I was planning for the Simple Stories Saturday for August, I thought most of the time in August we are headed back to school or it's right at the beginning of September. And so I thought that this was perfect to pull out this collection and document Eli going back to school. These photos are actually when he went back to school in 7th grade, which was last year. The first thing that I pulled out was this ruler paper, and I actually just cut 2 strips of the ruler because I wanted the teal color from the rulers. And it's very different than what I normally do because normally I would cut these and have all the colors combined. But I feel like I do get a lot of color on this layout. I also pulled out a typewriter font paper that is cream and the letters are in black. And then, of course, I had to pull out the plaid paper for my 1/4" strip. And amazingly enough, that is the only strips of paper that I get on this layout. I do pull out some 3x4 cards to add, but this layout is definitely photo heavy. The sketch calls for 4 6x4 photos, and so I pulled out these photos of Eli at the desk that we had set up for his back to school photos. And all of those photos are just so cute with him like sleeping on the books. We always do one where he's like peeking behind a book, usually a book that he is really interested in at that moment. So for this year, it was Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. And then there's just 2 pictures of him on either side, just sitting at the desk. And then the sketch does call for 3x3 photos at the top, but I had a hard time trying to cut my photos down to a square. So I thought I'm just going to leave it at 3x4 and bring in some 3x4 cards as well. So the sketch calls for pattern paper in half the spots and photos in half the spots, and that's exactly what I did. I pulled out a card that says, "You make the world a better place," and that's over on the far left. Time for school is in the center, first day of school, and then over on the far right, it says, "You are looking smart." These photos were taken by our photographer, Nikki, with Modern Pixel Photography. She is an amazing photographer, and if you are in the Central Florida area and need a recommendation for a photographer, I highly, highly recommend her. She's been photographing us since Eli started 5th grade and he started 8th grade this year. Her work is just amazing. And Eli is not one to get his photo taken. So the fact that they have built a relationship together, and it just makes it so much easier to allow her to get the photos. Sometimes I struggle with layouts that have these wall to wall photos and paper because you know that I struggle with getting things down straight. And I thought that if I got the 1/4" strip straight, that laying the additional paper and photos on top of it would be super easy. But for whatever reason, it did not work out for me. I even remeasured the 1/4" strip to make sure that it was straight. The ruler was saying that it was straight, but the photos were not lining up and it just wasn't making any sense. So I do end up pulling up the photos as well as that typewriter paper and the ruler, and then I measure it again to make sure that it's straight because I thought maybe it was because I was measuring it on the bottom and it was going off the edge, but when I measured it again, it was straight. So I put the ruler back down as well as the typewriter paper, and it still isn't 100% straight, but at this point, I was just going with it. So as I'm getting the rest of the paper and photos down, I do want to encourage you guys to check out all of the links listed below. Every month on the last Saturday of the month, we do the Simple Stories Hop, and it's just for us to showcase our love for Simple Stories. Simple Stories has so many different collections out there, and they are all so gorgeous. I wanted to join this hop because I have a ton of Simple Stories Say Cheese line. I just haven't had a chance to actually work that into creating my layouts. I actually was recently talking to Nicole about all of the layouts that I have planned. I have so many ideas planned out since I started using that spreadsheet back at the beginning of the year that now I'm starting to feel overwhelmed that I have too many layouts planned, which I don't know that that's a bad thing or a good thing. So I have been trying to really focus in on actually getting the layouts that I have planned, the photos that I've printed out, because having that spreadsheet has made it so much easier to print out photos in the right size because they're matched up with sketches, they're matched up with collections. It's just working for me so well that I have so many layouts planned, and I can't believe that I've been able to get up so many layouts for you guys. I feel like my channel has grown a lot in the last 8 months, and I have just been so consistent with the amount of layouts that I've been able to complete, and I wholeheartedly believe it is because of that spreadsheet that I have incorporated into my scrapbooking. There is a link below to the spreadsheet. I also have a video where I talk about my organization of my photos, my sketches, and using that spreadsheet, and I will link that here for you guys. So I had all of these full-size photos in the 6x4s as well as those 3x4s, and then I also had these two smaller 2x2 photos. Nikki does such an amazing job of capturing so many different poses, and she does these photo sessions pretty quickly. We're usually only with her for about 15 minutes, and we tend to get a ton of photos. Here you can just see that I have 9 photos on this layout, and they are really very different. She just is able to capture so much. I did use my layering guides to back these two 2x2 photos. I started out with 1/8 of an inch, but quickly realized that the white border was just too large. So I did go back in with the 1/16 of an inch and trim down those 2x2 photos. I'm going to have one of the 2x2 photos straight and flat to the layout, and then the other 2x2 photo, I am going to put it up on fun foam, and I'm also going to tilt it a little bit. And I really like the look of the straight one as well as the kind of crooked one. And if you look closely in the photo, he is sitting straight up in the one photo that's straight, and he's like leaning back on the locker in the other one. And of course, you know that I had to pull out my stitching tools. I didn't do a lot of stitching on this layout, but I did stitch the first day of school. That one I started at the top and then went to the bottom, then went east and west, so left and right. And then I found the center between the top and the left, and then the top and the right. And again, found the center after I found that center. That's a little difficult to explain. Hopefully you can see that in the video. Then I decided that I was going to stitch the handle part of the globe, like the piece that actually holds the globe in place. And I also decided that I was going to stitch the clock as well as the little heart. I looked through my threads and was able to find colors to match all of the pieces, and I'm just laying those out here. I also decided that I was going to do a white border around the layout. I slowed down the video here so that you can see the details of the stitching. You can see there that I have the globe and the clock, and then on the other side I just did a circle around the first day of school, and I did not stitch on the letterboard. I was video chatting with Nicole, and she suggested that I put tiny little stars in my stitching. So I decided that I would pull out the branding strip from this collection because that's honestly all that you need for these tiny stars. I pulled out the tiny star dies and my Big Shot, and I first cut 2 layers in the white. And I started doing this technique where my first layer goes directly on my silhouette mat, and then I'll do a second layer, and that will go right above my silhouette mat. So I know that I have one layer that is my back layer. I have one layer that I'm going to put on top of that. And then I know I need to cut a layer of the pattern paper. So here I'm using the branding strips of the red composition notebook as well as that teal green color. And then for the ruler paper, I was able to pull in the different colors from the collection by placing the star die on that ruler paper of the branding strip. And then of course bringing in the plaid pattern so that it brings in all of the colors. So you can see off to the right, I have one layer of white on my silhouette mat, one layer of white above my silhouette mat, and then one layer of the pattern paper. Then I pull out my glue press and add the middle layer of the white and then stack the pattern paper on top of that. Now I got this technique from Nicole when she was making her Dicker video, and I will post the link here if you would like to do these tiny stars. They are a little time consuming, but I love the fact that they match perfectly to the layout and they are just so tiny. I did lose one of the stars. I have no idea where it went, so I was looking for it for a little bit. Once I got the stars put together, I added 3 to the upper left and 3 to the bottom right. And then I adhered all 6 of those little tiny stars down using my little tweezers and my glue press. Once I got all of the stars down, then I bring out my stitching tools again and add a row of lines using my Tim Holtz ruler. Then I pulled out the white thread and started stitching on my layout. Now I do have all of my tools linked below for you guys. So if you would like to start your stitching journey, you can check out my link below to Amazon for all of the tools that I use, to include my needles, my threaders, and a starter pack of thread. Here I'm showing you how I have been stitching lately and tying off my knots. I will start with either the 3rd or the 4th hole. I will come up that hole and leave just a little bit of thread on the back. Then I go back down the hole that's closest to the edge and come back up again to the hole that's right next to the edge. Using my back stitch, I'll come back down. Then I will put my needle through the thread that I just stitched. I will do that twice, and then I will come through the loop, and then I will tie it around the little piece that was left in the back, and then again creating a loop or a knot in the back. And that's how I'm securing my thread while not making like really large knots in the back. And a back stitch is just basically starting in the back of the layout and coming up a hole, going down the next hole, and then skipping over the hole that you just went through, and then coming up and going back down the hole that you just made. I slowed the video down quite a bit. I had a couple of questions about people asking about back stitching, and so I wanted to include that part in this layout. I'm also really enjoying the white on white stitching right now. I have done that quite a bit in several layouts, and I just love that it adds a little bit of texture without adding too much to the layout. At this point, I realized that I needed to add a stitch in between the stars. So I pulled out my stitching tools and added 2 little tiny holes where the stars were, and then I also had to make sure that the stitching went behind the stars, and that was just personal preference. So I got all of my stitching done. I did a row at the top and a bottom on both sides, and then decided to pull out the ephemera pack for this collection. And I'm really just going through 2 of the ephemera packs that I have and pulling out anything that I think might work for this layout. I really like those books up there at the top, but I feel like they're just a little too big. So once I have gone through both of the ephemera packs, now I'm trying to decide what I'm going to add to the clusters. I find a notebook, and I really like that, and I also like this Prepare to be Schooled. So I add that to the top right. Then in the bottom left, I added a red composition notebook as well as a little binder clip. And then going back to the top right, I add a pencil and a push pin. I decided that I needed to ink up the edges, since I did ink up the edges of the cards as well as the pattern paper. So I'm just inking up all of the ephemera pieces. I mentioned before that I wasn't sure I liked these 1mm foam adhesive from Scrapbook.com, But the more that I use them, I do like having that different width. So my fun foam is probably closer to 2 millimeters. I obviously have the 2 millimeter foam strips from scrapbook.com as well. And then sometimes it's nice to have that 1 millimeter thickness because it does offset it. So it gives it a little bit of lift, but not as much as my fun foam does. So I did use the 1 millimeter strips on the binder clip, as well as that prepared to be schooled ephemera piece that I'm going to add to the upper right hand corner. And then I do put the pencil down flat. I also use the 1 millimeter foam adhesive on the push pin in the upper right hand corner. Then I pull out the puffy stickers and I add a puffy pencil to the bottom left, as well as a puffy red apple to the top right. Then I pulled out the sticker book and I found this tab that says "Come Back Summer." And I love that because Eli is always like, I'm not ready to go back to school yet. I first thought I could tuck it underneath the pencil, but I couldn't get the pencil up, so I decided that I would just add foam adhesive to the back of it and just stick it on top of the pencil. The sticker book also had the number 7, and I really liked the way that it looked. I love the red color, but it just didn't work in the 2 spots that I was thinking about putting the grade. At first I was going to do the first day of school, and then I also thought about the clock card, but it just wasn't working. I also tried the smaller one, and that wasn't working either. So I decided to finish up with the tiny stars, and I added a set of 3 to my cluster in the upper right, as well as the cluster in the bottom left. I do only add 2 to that because the only color that I had left was the same color as the ruler. So I'll come back to that later. I pulled out this card here that says "Best Teacher Ever" because I probably am not going to use that. And I pulled out my number dies to cut out the number 7 and the TH so that I have 7th. So I'm really just placing the dies around the card where there is no words so that I can pull in that corkboard look. I cut out this number 7 and it was just way too small. So I do decide to cut out a larger 7. I pulled out my Xyron to adhere the back of the TH because they are so tiny. Those letters are super thin. The Xyron is just super easy to use. I do go over it with my brayer as well as my pokey tool, and that helps with keeping the stickiness from like coming out of the letters. I also decided that I needed to ink the number 7 for some reason, even though I didn't ink the TH. Once I got the 7th down, I thought I need to have the year on here, and the composition notebook has the perfect placement for the year. So I took my roller date stamp and I used some washi to mask off the month and day, and then inked it, removed the washi, and added the year to the composition notebook. And then that is it for this video. Here is my final layout as well as some close-ups. I hope that you check out my description below to see all of the other people playing along this month for Simple Story Saturday. If you enjoyed this video, if you wouldn't mind giving me a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already and you want to see more double page layout inspiration, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope that you have a scrappy day.